to everybody. This is Vaya Pitelli from SEREN4 project. We are organizing this webinar today. I would like to thank you all for being here, and especially our speaker, Mrs. Elena Gilia, who is from Italy, and under these very strange and difficult circumstances, she was willing to continue with organizing this webinar. So I would like to thank her especially for that. I know that for a lot of us is a very strange week and very strange period, beginning with maybe working at home. For some is the case for several days now. So I would like to thank you all for being here, and let's try to continue with our normal activities. Well, moving to our webinar today, the topic is Open Science in Horizon 2020, good for science, good for society, and easy to do, hopefully, since Elena will explain us all. Elena is the head of the Open Access Office in University of Turin. She does this kind of information a lot, and she tries to pass this message to every possible audience. So we asked her to give us some insight and some guidelines for this topic, which seem to be very useful also for the next program. So Elena, thank you for being here, and I would like to ask you to start with your presentation. Elena, you may unmute your mic. Since that, let me tell you that at the end of the webinar, or during the webinar, you can write your questions in the chat box, and Elena can see it there, or I will transfer them at the end of the webinar. It seems that I don't see the presentation now. Elena, do you face any issue?
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay, because it was muted in a strange way. So
okay,
now,
but I don't see the presentation.
Now
it's loading.
Now can you see it?
It's still loading to me.
What about now?
Now it's on.
Okay, so here we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So thank you for having me. As you said, it's a bit, let's say, a strange period, strange things happening, a strange life, a strange virtual life. But anyway, here we go with the presentation. The slides will be available on Zenodo, the repository from CERN. And I can send you the link to the presentation afterwards. As you can see, I've tried to make it easy using all my photos just to keep the attention alive, because on a webinar is not so easy. So take-home messages at the beginning. Open access and open science are opportunities and not threats. The opposite of open science is bad science. If I would ask you what's the opposite of open, immediately you would say closed. But if you think of it, if science is not reproducible, if you don't have access to data, it's bad science, actually. It's not closed. Open science means a different way to do science and not just a set of rules like open access is. At least in Italy, we tend to overlap overlap the two concepts, but it's not the same. So open access is a piece, is a component of open science. It's easier because it's just a set of rules. On the opposite, open science is a different way to do science. So at the moment, technically, you would do it today. The barriers are still social and cultural. And of course, that's the reason why the European Commission is so supportive to open science, is because open science and open innovation are strictly connected. Why should we care about open science? Because now we are in this situation, but unfortunately, when you try to give a seminar to your researchers, the answer is always, we are too busy. But you are too busy in carrying on like this. So open science can have an alternative solution to make scholarly communication more effective. The problem is, if we don't think about this transformative potential of open science, it will be seen just like the umpteenth administrative burden, and that's really not the case. I hope at the end of this webinar you will be convinced of it. The best example of open science, I don't know if you know the man in the left low side of the slide is Sir Tim Berners-Lee. He was the one who invented the HTTP protocol, what makes the web running. So the HTTP protocol was invented when he was working at CERN in Geneva as an internal protocol to internally exchange documents within working groups. Then the CERN could have patented it, could have kept it closed. Instead, they decided to open it and to give it to every one of us. Can you imagine your life nowadays without the HTTP protocol? So in my opinion, that's the best example of open science. What does it mean, open science in practice? What are we going to see this morning? It's what's wrong with the current scholarly communication system at the beginning, just to understand why open science is needed, and how you can then, in the second part, we will see how you can do open science and open access in practice, and how to be compliant to open science requirement in Horizon 2020. So what about, to start with, we need to have an overview of scholarly communication. Usually, if I say scholarly communication, you might think of a paper, a journal paper, a journal scientific paper. Actually, that's not the case. As you can see here, you have a huge problem with access, the management of rights, because they are not balanced between authors, readers, and publishers. Technology deeply affected the scholarly communication, because if you think at when journals were only on paper, nothing as open science could have ever happened. We can speak about open science and open access just because we have the web. And then these orange components, economy and profits and costs. There are huge profits linked to scholarly communication. There are costs which are not so real, because the economy in scholarly communication is linked to the prestige of the journals, so it's the so-called inelastic market, meaning that the rule of supply and demand does not apply, as if you want to read what Nature published, you have to subscribe to Nature, and if the subscription rate for Nature is $10,000, you have to pay $10,000, you have no discount. And then you see the red label, research evaluation, because all the above is deeply affected by the criteria of research evaluation and the prestige linked to the journals. So I don't know if you know how the scholarly communication process works, but it was knowing. So an author submits his or her work to a journal. The the submitted work goes in peer review, meaning that 2 experts review the article, then the article can be accepted or rejected. In the meanwhile, it can pass also 1 year in reviewing the paper, and then it is published. There is no economic return, so no author is rewarded, no reviewer is rewarded. What they expect is prestige. Again, citations, prestige. So what are we doing now? What is scholarly communication nowadays? The situation is like this. So we are paying commercial publishers to lock up a content authors gave them for free. And we are paying a huge amount of money, globally $7.6 billion in 2016. If you look at this figure, if you divide this amount of money for the overall 2 million journal papers published every year, nowadays, with subscription journals, we are paying every article between 3,800 to 5,000 dollars, sorry, in the subscription model. So we are not talking about open access article processing charges. Nowadays, we are paying per each article this amount of money. And this is the increase, 521%, of the costs of journal articles in the last, let's say, 30 years. Can you imagine that the budget in libraries increased by this rate? Of course not. So libraries had to cut subscriptions. So the first message is today reading is not for free. Usually in my university, when my researcher open the laptop and click on PDF, they get the PDF and it seems a sort of magic, but it's not magic. It's because at the University of Turin, every year we spend 2 million euros in subscription to scientific journals. So today reading is not for free. Speaking about access, we are all in this emergency of emergence of coronavirus. It seems that researchers are opening everything like data, research, and so on and so forth. Of course, it's great, it's awesome, but the flip side is that it means that our normal behavior is to put barriers to science. You know that some librarian, let's say, freed more than 5,000 papers with the hashtag emergency open access, but it's not just in case of emergency. All the literature should always be free for anyone. And you see, this is wonderful. This is Nature. Calling all coronavirus researchers, keep sharing, stay open, and then above you read subscribe. So this is really the situation in which we are today. Global officials called yesterday or 2 days ago for free access to coronavirus research. Basically, it should be vital to address this global crisis, but why only this global crisis? Any research could save lives or improve our lives. So as Ethel Joseph put it, it's time to make open access the default for all scientific research once and for goddamn all, please. And that's the same call we read at the end of January. When we know that the openness of data and papers speeds discovery, why do we lock up articles and data, and why are we keeping doing it, and have we kept doing it for ages? If that was not true, SciHub would not exist. Do you know SciHub? It's this pirate website, but everyone is accessing and using it. And as the former rector at the University of Liège is saying in this tweet, The single fact that providing free information on universal science is illegal tells us a lot about how absurd it has become to rely on the old research publication model. We spend a lot of money. Does it work? So the average publication time is 9-11 months. Does it make sense in a moment like that? So does it make sense to have research on coronavirus published if everything goes well in 9 months? This is a tweet from Paola Masuzzo, a young researcher, a young open science advocate. We are celebrating the publication in a famous and glamorous journal after 2.5 years of revisions. I do feel happy for the authors, of course, but I cannot help wondering what's there to celebrate in such a slow scientific dissemination process. We have a huge reproducibility crisis, but if science is not reproducible, is it good science or bad science? We have a huge increase of retractions. Retractions mean when a published article is retracted, it used to be only for mistakes. Now it's mostly due to falsified or entirely fabricated data. And that's the worst situation, because all the retractions, the great number of retractions, incur in the most prestigious journals. Because if, according to the evaluation criteria, you have to do everything to publish in the most prestigious journal, you do everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything, including fabricate your data. And then we have a huge increase, always due to this evaluation criteria, of self-citations. This is a case study coming from my country, Italy, as we have a strict and old-fashioned national research assessment exercise. So research culture is broken. If you want to have a look at this TED Talk, she's a young researcher, Rachel Ainsworth, and she tells perfectly why this culture is broken and how open science can fix it. It all depends on this evaluation criteria, because evaluation became an obsession. Like if you have a look at this report by the Royal Society, not only we are failing to provide the right incentives, we are actually providing perverse one. And this is a statistic law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And of course, the referral is to the impact factor. People game the system at every level, and this risks the loss of valuable research in favor of fashionable research. And also citations. This was an experiment conducted in the chemistry area. If you look at the colored bar, they are the real answer. So researchers were asked, in your opinion, what's the most cited, what's the most significant, what's the article you would share more widely? So in colored bar, you have the real answers, and in gray bar, you have the correspondent citation in bibliographic databases like Scopus and Web of Science, meaning, again, that people game the system at every level. So you cite the work of your colleague, of your friend laboratory, but not the one you would cite if all this obsession for evaluation would not be in place. So we are locked in this deadly embrace. Researchers, funders, and publishers, I always thought that meant making things public, keep each other hostage in a deadly embrace by continuing to conduct, publish, fund, and judge science in the same as it was in the past century. And so far, no one seems to be able to break this deadlock. So maybe we need more balance. And that's why we need open science. That's a good definition of open science, the transition to a new, more open and participatory way of conducting, publishing, and evaluating scholarly research. Central to this concept is the goal of increasing cooperation and transparency in all research stages, and that's important, in all research stages. So we are not talking only about the final output, the publications, but every step of the research life cycle. Open science is science by anyone and for everyone. Don't forget that also citizen science is a component of open science. Open science is endeavoring to preserve the rights of others to reach independent conclusions about my data and work. Open science depends on open minds, is an ongoing practice and not a checkbox at the end. And to get open science, of course, you need open outputs, you need an open infrastructure, but if the factor, the cultural change is zero, the results will be zero. So we need also a huge cultural change. And if you want to have a look, this is a very short video, 4 minutes, neuroscience laboratory in Canada. Every night they put the perfectly fair, anonymized data of the patient out on the web, because their aim is to find a treatment before. Not publishing, but finding a treatment. And don't forget this, please. Open science is a human right. So this is the declaration, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to enjoy and share the scientific advancement and its benefit. And last week there was a conference in Africa on this topic. Open science is an umbrella term. It includes all the things you see in this wonderful taxonomy. So open access to text, open data, open reproducible research, the evaluation, the policies, the tools, and as you can see, is a complex term. It's not just like open access to text. The principles of open scholarship: transparency, accountability, inclusivity, rigor, findability, reproducibility. So in one word, open science is just science done right. Open science is also functional to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. If you want to hear, this is a very short interview, 5 minutes, to the creator of the SDG, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, and he clearly states, without open science, you could never achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And the same concept you will find in these documents by the United Nations and the UNESCO. So here we go. When I told you open science means changing the way you do research, this is the open science rainbow made by these colleagues at the University of Utrecht, Bianca Kramer and Jérôme Bosman. And as you can see, for any step in the research cycle, meaning conceiving your research, searching for data, analyzing, writing, publication, outreach, and assessment, you have the correspondent tool to make it open. For instance, you can pre-register your study, which will be a real revolution, because then you can't falsify the data if you pre-register what's the target and what's the methodology of your research. You can share data, you can share the code, you can share the notebook of your lab, you can share protocols and workflow, you can collaborative writing directly in XML just to enable text mining practice. You can use actionable formats and standard formats. You can share preprints. You can use open peer review. Then you can publish open access, or you can simply deposit open access. You can use open licenses like the Creative Commons. You can share the posters and presentation. You can communicate through social media, and you can also add alternative evaluation like the alternative metrics. So you can open really every step of your research process. And you need to make your data fair, which means findable, and to be findable, you need metadata and persistent identifiers, and that's really relevant for Horizon 2020 because in Horizon 2020, data must be fair. You need to be accessible, meaning that your data should be deposited in trusted repositories, and you need to use standard formats. You need to be interoperable, you need ontologies and standards again, and to be reusable, you need licenses and documentation to document how you get your data, and if you use some software, you need also to deposit the software. So in order to be fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, you need all these tools, but that would require an entire different webinar for 2 hours. Please bear in mind that accessible does not equate to open. The acronym is FAIR and not FOIR. So accessible means only that I have to, as a researcher, I have to know where the data are stored and under what access condition. And if you want to know more, you have 3 very quick videos, 15 minutes each, created by Danish colleagues. And you need also a data management plan. Please don't forget that the data management plan in Horizon 2020 is a deliverable due in month 6. A data management plan is a structured way to think to your data, the collection, the preservation, the description, and the sharing of your data. It's a sort of commitment on how you will manage your data. It's a living document to be updated. Even in Horizon 2020, 3 data management plans are foreseen, 1 at the beginning, 1 for the midterm evaluation, and 1 as the final one. And then, of course, you have to act accordingly. So the data management plan is not just an administrative burden, it is a commitment on how you will manage your data. If you want to try, this is a wonderful tool, the FAIR Data Management Wizard, because it's a wizard guiding you to build your data management plan. And if you open, of course, it grows according to your answer, if you answer no or yes. And if you click on the book icon, it will open Barenmont's guide for FAIR data. And the chapter is, it's all here. So what's up, do, don't. Very practical, very target oriented. So it's really a good tool. Why should we care about FAIR data? Because now we have the European Open Science Cloud. That was the day of the launch of the EOSC in Vienna in November 2018. So the European Open Science Cloud will be a seamless access to open by default FAIR data. And as you might know, the European Commission is heavily investing in the European Open Science Cloud, more than 4 billion euros in the next years. So just to recap what the Commission did for open science, have a look at this paper. It's really great. The author is Jean-Claude Burgelman with his collaborators. He used to be the chief of the unit which created the European Open Science Cloud. And this is the key message of this article. There is value and risk of being a first mover, but there is higher risk of being a follower. That's another important message. Open science will make science more efficient, reliable, and responsive to societal challenges. Open science has shifted the prime focus of researchers away from publishing towards knowledge sharing. Of course, this is the keystone, changing the reward and incentive system. And again, the mention of data management plans and FAIR data. Why the Commission is so supportive toward open science, and this is former Commissioner, Carlos Moedas. Open science is also about making sure that science serves innovation and growth. And the principles behind the whole Horizon 2020 program is as open as possible, as close as necessary. So by default, all the data and publication should be open. You have to keep them closed only if you have clear reasons to do so. There are other important documents you need to know. The recommendation, April 25, the Commission recommendation on access to and preservation of scientific information. Every member state should have a national plan on open science. Every research performing organization, meaning university or any research center, should have a policy for open access to text and open access to data. And of course, you need to change evaluation and to provide training and skills to your researcher. And then you have the so-called public sector directive, which was revised after 20 years, and now research data are included as public sector data. So they need to be public. So the first one is a recommendation, but the second one is a directive. So it, in 2 years, it should be enacted also as national law. To support open science, the European Commission issued a lot of documents. You can see them all here, and you can refer to them. As you can see, since 2017, it was clear that evaluation of research should acknowledge open science practice. And in the last one, the future of scholarly publishing and scholarly communication, the conclusion is actually simple. The evaluation of research is the keystone. So this is very clear even at European level. Coming to open access, as we are almost done. Coming to open access, this is the definition of open access: the right of access to and the license to copy, use, distribute, transmit, and display the work publicly for any responsible purpose, subject to proper attribution of authorship. And that's it. The pillars of open access is knowledge is a common, and I think we can all agree on that. Scholarly communication is a great conversation, so the more it's open, the better and the more effective it is. And the result of publicly funded research must be publicly available. That's the pillar on which Horizon 2020 and the next Horizon Europe program are based on. So how open access works, we have 2 roads, the so-called green and gold roads. But Houston, we have a problem. Still now, at least in Italy, the perception of the mean researcher on open access is journals only, so only publishing, always paying for publishing, and open access publishers are always predatory publishers. That's the common perception. So please share this paper, which is great because it deals with these 10 myths around open scholarly publishing, let's say dismantling them. Okay, so this is very important for you to share. What about the green road? The green road is also called self-archiving, meaning that authors self-archive in an open access repository his or her final version of the paper wherever it was published, according to copyright agreements. So self-archiving is doable always. It's always for free, so you never pay to deposit. And 82% of international publishers allow some kind of self-archiving, including the biggest, Elsevier, Wiley, Springer Nature. The copyright policies are listed in this precious database called Sherpa Romeo. There are possible limitations, meaning that the version allowed to be deposited is not the PDF, the published PDF. It's the so-called post-print or author's accepted manuscript, and publishers might require embargo period, meaning that embargo means that the paper is deposited, but for let's say 12 or 18 months it's closed. Okay, so it's deposited, but it's not visible. But anyone can ask the author, so the metadata are always public, even under embargo, so anyone interested in your paper can ask you to provide the paper. And that's the same for the 18% of publisher not allowing any kind of self-archiving. So when you find this green tick, it means allowed. When you find this tick is allowed with restrictions. If it's not allowed, it's clear because there is a red cross. So in this case, the second case, the author post-print is allowed with 12 months embargo. These are the restrictions asked from the publisher. Just to be clear, this is the same article. On the left side, you see the author's accepted manuscript version. On the right side, sorry, you see the PDF published version. So the left, the one allowed to self-archiving is the left one. Why deposit, so self-archiving Green Road is important? Because authors don't have to change their habits. If the research assessment criteria ask you to publish in the highest impact factor journal, please do it, because your career, of course, it's important, but then you can make the content free by self-archiving your final version of the work. So the message here should be clear. You can grow old like these French retired people, publishing in the same most prestigious journal, and then you self-archive your author's accepted manuscript in an open access repository. Why I underline an open access repository? Because ResearchGate and academia.edu are not open access repository. They are good for as a social network, as academic social network, so let's use it as academic social network, but not as a repository for your works, because they are commercial. So if they are not profitable, they can close tomorrow. If they are profitable, they can be bought tomorrow. There used to be another one, which is Mendeley. Mendeley was bought by Elsevier in 2017. Social Sciences Research Network was bought by Elsevier in 2018. So if a big company buy these services, what about the content you put in it? It can be closed tomorrow. Okay, so that's an important message to your researcher. And actually, both, at least ResearchGate was sued by commercial publishers, so they have to close all the PDF which authors archived there, violating the copyright deal. So that was the green road. The gold road means publishing in an open access journal. Open access journals are listed in the directory of open access journals, more than 14,000, 27%, so 27%, not 100%, of the journals require the payment of article processing charges, going from $250 to $2019 per article. But pay attention. The difference between subscriptions and article processing charges. Subscriptions are paid every year every institution pay for the same content, meaning that if the institution of Turin, if the University of Turin pays for the subscription to Nature, only the University of Turin affiliated see the pages of Nature. Another university has to pay the same amount to access the same journal. Subscriptions increase every year, and they close the content for those who have no subscription. And I mean medical doctors, like in the case of the coronavirus, small and medium enterprises, startups, but even our students, our PhD, once they graduated, once they are outside the university, they can't access anymore all the content they used to. On the contrary, article processing charges, meaning open access, when in the 27% of cases in which you have to pay to publish, they are paid once and forever. They are paid only by the institution of the corresponding author. They open the content to all and forever. So there is a huge difference between a subscription and the APC. And don't mix, please, native open access publishers with no revenue but article processing charges and traditional publishers like Elsevier, Springer Nature, Wiley, offering an open option because their main revenue streams is still from subscriptions. So when they ask you for an article processing charge, it's what is technically called double dipping. So you pay twice because the journal remains by subscription and the single article is made open access by paying a fee, which normally starts from 3,000 euros and more. Okay, so that's another difference. This hybrid option, unfortunately, is to be used only in Horizon 2020 for embargo reasons, and we will see in a few minutes. Yes, that was half an hour. So open access in Horizon 2020, and we are almost done. You know that according to Article 29, you have the obligation to disseminate results, meaning text and data, because the open data pilot at the beginning was only for 9 disciplines, and it was extended in 2017 to any project funded in Horizon 2020. So to be Horizon 2020 compliant for texts, you have 4 steps. First of all, you have to deposit a machine-readable version of your paper, and that has to be done even though you publish in an open access journal, because of preservation and text mining purposes. So, first step, you have to deposit a machine-readable version of your paper. Second step, you have to give access to this paper within 6 months in the STEM, so science, technology, and medicine, and 12 months in the humanities and social sciences. Problem is, if you have a look at this Sherpa Romeo database with the copyright policies, there are a few publishers allowing for those lengths of embargo. So embargoes are longer than 6 or 12 months. Usually they are 12 and 18 months. So in order to be compliant in Horizon 2020, but only in this case, you have to go for this open choice, which we mentioned before, so the hybrid open access, or of course if you want to publish with a traditional publishers, if you want to publish in an open access journal, that's fine, but in any case the article processing charges are eligible costs, so the Commission will reimburse you. Then step number 3, you have to put your grant number and funding program in the metadata, and you have to associate the data underlying your research. For data, step 1, you have to deposit the data and all the documentation needed with the most open license. And again, the costs for curation and data management are eligible costs. You have to give access, but in this case, you can set your own embargo. So if you need embargo period to further exploit your data, it's perfectly fine. And again, you have to put the grant number and funding program in metadata. And within month 6 of the project, you have to deliver a data management plan and, of course, stick to it. In this Horizon 2020 compliance, the Open Air project can help you. First of all, providing Zenodo, this catch-all repository in which you will find also this slide, the presentation of this morning, in associating data and publication, and in providing tools to anonymize and a guide to legal aspects. You will find everything on the Open Air website. About the dissemination costs, you will find in the annotated model grant agreement 6.2.D3, dissemination costs are eligible to be reimbursed, but they must incur before the end of the project. And of course, they must be included in the initial budget. So if you plan to publish 10 journal papers, you have to put in the initial budget, let's say 30,000 euros, because you can consider the maximum price, so 3,000 euros per article. About data, again, you need to make all the data open according to the principle as open as possible, as close as necessary. And by data, we mean the data needed to validate the results and any other data to make it possible to access, mine, exploit, reproduce, and disseminate your research data. The data management plan, again, is a deliverable within month 6, and it needs to be updated. I underline this because it seems that in Italy our project did not get the message clear. Data management plan in Horizon 2020, you have the guideline issued in 2016 with several revisions, and so you have all the guidelines here, and you have this very precious tool, which is the DMP online, the Data Management Plan online. It's free, you can register for free, you can create your own account, and then you have several templates to draft online your data management plan. There is also a template for Horizon 2020. So you simply have to answer the questions the DMP online poses you. Again, data curation costs are eligible to be reimbursed, but not only for data curation, also for costs for data storage and for data management. And that's why a data management plan is needed, because if you incur in data storage, if you generate terabyte of data, the normal repositories like Zenodo or other disciplinary repository might ask you for a fee. So you need to know it from the beginning and to put it in the initial budget. And that's it. If you still are asking what is open science, you can refer to these wonderful open science training courses delivered by the Project Foster. And that's it from me for the moment. Now it's up to you, and I'm waiting for your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena, for your very detailed and full of information presentation. Well, I would like to ask all participants to ask questions if they have. They can use the chat box to write their questions. I think that Elena gave us indeed very clear guidelines how to deal with open access in Horizon 2020 proposals and projects. It was very interesting that we have some information for further reading in her presentation. Her presentation will be sent to all of you by me, as well as the recording. I will send you the recording and the presentation at the latest by Wednesday. If you haven't received the link to this webinar by me personally, please send me an email in order to have your address to send you the information. Well, we have a question. Does the UK website for DMP functions as a wizard? Elena, could you please answer to this question?
Yeah. I was typing the link to the presentation.
Okay.
So no, the DMP online does not function as a wizard. The wizard is another tool. You will find the link on the slide. The DMP function as a, let's say, as a template, meaning it's divided into 6 or 9 sections. It depends on the template. And if you open, for instance, the first section, you will find a box, a text box, in which you can edit directly online, asking you what kind of data is the project producing, what format of data are you using. So it's just a template. You can you fill in the text box, then in the end you fill in all the sections. Of course, you can save it and going back later, and then at the end you can click on save as, and if you choose a PDF, it generates a PDF, and you can include the PDF to your grant proposal or whatever. But the wizard is another tool because it's more, even in the DMP, on the right side, you have a guide. So meaning that the questions like which format are you using have an explanation on the right side. And the wizard is more to guide you in dealing with your data, okay? Like questions like, are you using pre-existing data? Yes, no. Are you using data, are you using sensitive data? Yes, no. And then according to your question, to your answer, sorry, the wizard creates new paths. Is it clear?
Thank you, Elena. It seems that it is clear also from the person who asked the question. There is one long question in the chat box: how to convince people and communities to share knowledge for free when the entire system of everything is based on profit? Nowadays funding for research is super competitive and grants are hard to come by. People do this as a job and they have to be published at the prestigious journal to advance in their career. Therefore, in this free market, these prestigious journals can charge whatever they want. Doesn't a real open access approach require an overview of all parameters as we know them? Okay, it's also a comment, not only a question, but
but as I told you, this is perfectly right. It makes perfect sense, because the evaluation criteria are central, are crucial. crucial, so we need to change the evaluation criteria and this prestige economy linked to the publications. There is another I think it was a newspaper, not a scientific journal, but I can share it with you in a minute, maybe when someone will be tape another question, exactly implying that this coronavirus emergence might be, a game changer. Because now it's clear that this competitive environment does not suit science. So this environment just makes sense for the profit of the publishers, but not for the advancement of science. And about funders, more and more funders are requiring to be open. If you think about the Wellcome Trust, and if you think at the European Commission itself, what they are asking in Horizon 2020 is exactly to go as open as possible, as close as necessary. So many funders are supporting open science now as they see the benefit for the whole society. So the Wellcome Trust, the NIH in the United States, Teleton in Italy, so many funders are going open and requiring that data are open. Of course, the crucial, the keystone again is this evaluation criteria. If the National Agency for Evaluation or the committee in charge of evaluation, if they keep evaluating by impact factor, nothing will change. But anyway, the message should be clear. Even though you are forced to publish in these high impact factor journals, you can go open. So every tool you saw in this open science rainbow, you can do it even though you have to publish in high impact factor journals. And many, and a growing number of high impact factor journal, meaning all the Science Nature group and many of Elsevier journals, are already requiring authors to share their data. So it's not so, let's say, alien to this culture, because even commercial journals are asking to share the data. And now I'm looking for this paper, which might be really interesting for you, if anyone is typing another question in the meanwhile.
Thank you, Elena. I think it was a very interesting input from your side about this particular issue. It seems that we don't have other questions in the chat box. I hope that everyone enjoyed this webinar, and as I told you, I will share all the material with you. Elena, you can still copy your information, the paper you mentioned, in the chat box, and of course you can send it to me in an email in order to share it with the participants of the webinar.
Yeah.
Once again, I would like to thank you very much for providing this presentation today to all of us, especially under these strange and difficult circumstances. I wish you and all colleagues here to be calm and safe and keep our interesting work done. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here.
And thank you for inviting. And of course, if you need anything in the future, I am here at your disposal.
Thank you very much, Elena. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.